share with the viewers 1973? How did you get the opportunity to be in that area to take a picture of that?
Well, growing up in Alabama, at that time we had no black elected officials in the country. Because of Tuskegee students and because a black man ran for sheriff, we got behind him and he became elected the sheriff of Macon County, Amundsen. Being involved in African studies at Tuskegee, having African friends, civil rights, and involved in that campaign, I wanted to see what other the racist Americans would tell us that Africans cannot handle themselves, they cannot rule themselves. And I heard about, because of my African friends who introduced me to Haile Selassie and Nkrumah, I heard about this attempt at organizing continentally of Africans called the Organization of African Unity, where once a year in different countries, all heads of state come together and they have a big week-long conference. And I heard about this when I spent my last summer in Ghana. My summer 72 in Ghana. And I heard that the 10th anniversary was coming up since independence, the first independent African countries, and it was going to be held in Addis Ababa. And I said, whoa, I have got to go because I want to see for myself black people who are in charge of other black people's lives. So I pulled my pennies together and I got a ticket to Addis Ababa. I lived in a cheap hotel. I registered as a press person, media person, and for that week, I had access to photograph from the airport to the conference halls, different members of Africa leadership. So each leader who flew into Addis Ababa was met at the airport by His Majesty.
Oh, he met every single leader at the airport?
He met every single leader at the airport. So this particular, my first time of experiencing His Majesty was I'm corralled with the press, and these four big guys start walking across the tarmac towards this plane. And in the middle, and these four big guys, there was some power in the middle that was coming out of it that wasn't them that I saw. I didn't know what it was until they stopped at the dais, and this little person walks up on the stand. And I'm like, what? You know, it's the first time in my life I took the camera from my eye, because the moment was too real to have lenses between me and it. I took the camera down. I just took it in. And then the head of state came off the plane, came to the dais, they said something, and then they walked out with these four big guys again. So
hold on. So you're telling me the emperor was radiating the energy that you can feel even though you didn't see him?
Right. So when they left, I turned around to all the other guys, all Africans, and I said, well, who is that? And somebody said, well, that's the emperor. The emperor? I mean, I came to see other black people who rule other black people. I didn't know there was an emperor there, you know? I said, and then I didn't know that person who emanates that particular power, aura, was local. So they said, that's the emperor. I said, oh. So then tell me about this emperor. So then I began to learn from the Ethiopians their history. And I then, every time I saw, it was in a passageway where people were passing, we could photograph them, set up. The emperor, whenever I was in every situation I could get where the emperor was there, just to see if this was really real. Maybe, maybe I was, it's a high altitude place. You go there, and the first day, you really can't run because you're 5,000 feet above sea level. And I said, well, maybe, that has something to do with it. I don't know, I was willing to find a way to dismiss it, that there was something else that was happening. But every time I saw him, they had that same aura. And then, later in the middle of the week, I'm straining when he makes appearance to see if he would notice me. Yeah. He didn't notice me, but then I found out something. Maybe he had, and I didn't know it, because when he got to me, I realized he was looking 20 feet in front of him. Yeah. So if he had noticed me, it was 20 feet before he got to me. Then, the picture, the last day there of the OAU, the emperor addresses all the delegates. And at the podium, as he's addressing all the delegates in African Hall, this is where I made that picture. The emperor was incredible as an entity. In fact, when I started work at the New York Times, I wanted to see white heads of states. Does anybody else have this presence? None of them have it. Then years later, the Pope came, anxious. I go to cover the Pope. Does the Pope have it? He don't have it. Only His Majesty had it. His Majesty had this kind of aura that he was with us, but he was with them. Something much bigger. He owned where his foot stood, but he owned everything else. His aura just permeated everything. I never encountered a being like that before. And I haven't encountered a being like that since.
Could you share his assistance for other African nations in regards to providing arms and the assistance that people don't know about, how he helped them during the revolutionary times?
Africa is free because of this man. Only because of this man. This man had an army. He was independent. Their independence was guaranteed because of the last fight that Menelik had in the late 1800s when they slaughtered 25,000 Italian soldiers who were invading the country. The Battle of Adwa. When Italy was trying to tell Europe, if you want to deal with Ethiopia, you come through us. They said, no. No. Once they have won that battle, all of Europe, all of white world shook. This is the one time that the savage African slaughtered them.
They never speak about that historically. I've heard you wrote a book on that. Yeah.
Well, there's reasons for that too. So, His Majesty, because he had an army, because he was independent, and because he is respected by other heads of state, because his dynasty was older than any of theirs, he could buy weapons. He could buy many weapons as he wanted. So what did he do? He bought twice as many weapons that he needed for his army. And what did he do next? He sent out, through Kwame Nkrumah and other people, I want all of the independence fighters, the guerrillas, to come here. And I want my army to train them, and I will send them back with arms. Each one of them were trained by Haile Selassie's army. Africa is free because of this man. So when Nelson Mandela was freed, the first place he went outside of South Africa was where? Ethiopia. The second place he went was where? Libya, for Gaddafi, because Gaddafi was also able to do the same thing. And then the third place he went is Cuba, to Castro. Why? The American government and Reagan was supporting a CIA stoolie named Savimbi in Angola. Angola was a front line from South Africa coming up past Namibia, South Africa, Namibia to Angola, to next Congo. Fidel Castro had an idea. Fidel Castro was an Africanist. And Fidel says, look, he says to his Russian friends, let's stop this. Let's protect the Africans. I'll send my people, my soldiers, to fight the South Africans if you, the Russians, will give us arms and fly them over. That's what the Russians did. Castro, every day, was a field commander from Cuba telling people with the maps what to do. They defeated Savimbi. They killed Savimbi. They defeated his army out of Angola. And then they start with their big guns. The largest cemeteries in Africa in West Africa and Ethiopia are Cuban soldiers. After they defeated the South Africans out of Angola, they then pushed them into Namibia and defeated them there. And then, as the South African army was in retreat, Botha and those boys had an idea. Let us give Mandela freedom. Let us go for a political change. That's the only thing that stopped the Cubans from invading. They were on the border to invade when the white South Africans says, okay, we can find a way to make a deal here. So that is the story. If you Google it, Cuba and Africa, you'll get that story. It's not that it's hidden from us. We just don't know anything about it. If we know something about it and we Google it, it's there. A friend of mine, an Ethiopian filmmaker, did a great film on it. But, so that's why the ANC, even though they had the guerrillas working, they were up against a lot, but they were backed by the American government, which refused to sanction them, and at the same time kept resupplying them. They and the Israelis were selling them the most weapons. So Castro with the support of the Russians put a stop to it. That's why South Africa is free. But all of it started because of Haile Selassie.